What's up, everybody? You asked for it, and now you've got it. It's time for a little bit of NFL playoff DFS Pick 6. It's the Rotoworld DFS Pick 6, presented by RotoGrinders. I'm Eric Crane, and I'm joined, as I have been, by all 17 weeks of this NFL season. First off, we got Evan Silva, the big dog. What's up, man? How you doing?
What's up, man? Coming off a strong Week 17, hoping to build that momentum. Josh Allen was awesome, and it's fun to root for a guy that you definitely have questions about as a real NFL player, but you can kind of use that to your advantage because a lot of people don't want to play him because they have questions about him as a real NFL player, but he's really good at fantasy, so that's always fun, just trying to find little edges. Like we're going to be doing on this short slate, we're going to be going real deep, talking about dudes like Vincent Smith and Mo Alley Cox, and it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, just insert random Colts tight end here. That's what we can do. It's every week, man. It's like, oh look, there's the Colts tight end that I've never heard of, and last week I was tilted because I did so poorly on the main slate, so I just scripted the second half slate on FanDuel. And then who's the guy who scored the touchdown right away for the Colts, the tight end?
This past week?
Yeah.
Eric Ebron? Inman
scored. No, it was another one.
Inman scored the first touchdown.
Inman, but he's a wide receiver.
No, it was some other scrub tight end that I had never heard of, but whatever.
Luke Stocker scored in that game.
It was somebody worse than Luke Stocker.
Did you have some Luke Stocker in that game?
Ryan Hewitt. The cat's got it. Ryan Hewitt. Yeah, whatever.
It's third string tight end.
Yeah, I know. No, it was just I was so tilted about the main slate, so I scripted the late slate, and then Ryan Hewitt scores a touchdown. It's just oh, my night's over. Okay. Speaking of, the night being over, what's up, Reeves? How you doing, buddy?
Happy New Year, guys, man. It was a good DFS season. Hopefully we roll it through over in the playoffs. We could talk a little about about how we approach these playoffs. I think we all do it a little bit differently. I play no cash games in the playoffs. I treat it kind of like Thanksgiving. I'm strictly tournament. You're the short slate god, so we always rely on you. We have one extra game, not set of 3 games. The main slate we got 4.
Four's a little much for me, but I'll do what I can.
Yeah. Do you expand your player pool a little bit with 4, or do you still?
I go to 9 players instead of 8. I keep that tight, boy. I keep it tight.
But these are always fun, like Evan said. These are where you have the slate breakers. Is this the week that David Moore decides to get out of his slumber and catch 2 touchdowns? Is a Ravens wide receiver actually going to catch a pass this week? These weird things that, can, if you have some exposure to and you're ahead of the field on, can really tilt, a slate of games for you. So, we'll see if someone breaks it. Hopefully it's not like Garrett Blount again. We don't have to deal with that.
Well, I'm just glad Garrett Blount's not on this slate because you guys would be crying when he puts up another 18 points, and I give you the old "I told you." I'll just send the Blunt gifs. A lot of them I can't actually tweet out, but the LeGarrette Blunt gifs, gifs, I certainly can. So, Evan, you looking forward to these playoffs, man? How are you feeling about this opening slate?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be interesting because we're going to talk about. I think are we just going to go in order of time slot?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about by far the best game first. And then there's going to come in into play a lot of mental stuff because, do you want to, make decisions based on, hey, I want to have guys, left on the Sunday slate. You know what I'm saying? And I think the best idea is probably just to play all 3 slates. You play the Saturday slate independently, and you play, the Saturday plus Sunday slate independently, and then you play the Sunday slate independently as well. I think you play all 3. And that's one way that you cannot, really, because I know that people are going to be because I'm doing this, is I kind of want to have dudes in the later games, but this first game is the best one to attack by far. And so, if you're going to stack one and you're not factoring in, these mental, field-based, the feel of the slate, then I think you might talk yourself out of some of the best plays.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk myself into the best plays. I'm going to keep playing the best plays. And I'll tell you what, a lot of those best plays, let's be honest, they're coming from this first game. It's Indy at Houston. It's a 49-point total. Houston, they're 3-point favorites. Houston, the spread has moved toward them a little bit, and the total is on the rise here. So, Reeves, let's talk about this Indy side first, because this will be our third show this year where we've had this exact matchup. Every single time we've had this exact matchup, we've thrown pom-poms up for T.Y. Hilton. Every single time that's happened, he's got banged up during the game and still had a good game. So, Reeves, I'm just going to ask you right now, is T.Y. Hilton maybe not a lock, but nearly a lock for you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, because like there's a little bit of there's as much downside you could throw into DeAndre Hopkins as possible to throw into him. He's not a guy we're ever fading or doing anything like that. But I mean, the Colts are a team that don't give up like big games to wide receivers. I mean, yeah, Hopkins had the only wide receiver one game against them this year. In the last game, he only had 36 yards on 10 targets. They only 44.5% of the catches the Colts allow to wide receivers. It's by far the fewest in the league. They play that zone. We talked about it week one when we talked about the Colts on the show. They were going to play this defense that just didn't allow big plays. They didn't allow teams to crush them, down the field to splash plays. And that's exactly how it's played out wire to wire with that Colts defense. So, I mean, if you're going to be a little lower on Hopkins than the field might, because he's been scorching too. Hopkins has been on fire entering the playoffs. So, I mean, T.Y. Hilton will be the next guy you look to. He's averaged 103.2 receiving yards per game in 14 career games against the Texans. That includes a 4 for 115 and a 9 for 199 against them this year. We talked about the Texans defense not being able to keep up with speed receivers all season. T.Y. Hilton's practiced like twice in the last 8 weeks. We don't care that he's not doing anything now. He's going to play. We know he's going to play. I didn't realize that we talked about this game the other 2 times they met during the season too. That's kind of interesting because, I mean, this is kind of when Luck's season turned around. Andrew Luck's season, everyone kind of was down on Luck the first month of the season. Oh, he's throwing all these passes short of the sticks. They had to bring in, Jacoby Brissett to throw in the Hail Mary. And then, he faced the Texans that first time, and then his fantasy season never looked back. He was like a locked-in, like, top 5, top 6 QB every week. He torched the Texans, both times they played. It's a defense that's been getting lit up in the passing game. So, I mean, we're going to be all in on the core Colts plays because they run into a great spot.
Yeah, and the nice thing about the core Colts plays too is, Evan, we know exactly who it's going to be. It's Hilton and it's Hebron, and it's a great matchup for both of them, which means that just if you're going to like both those guys, we've got to like some Andrew Luck too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that Reeves, you put out rankings today, right? Just straight rankings for the wild card round.
No, those come out tomorrow. I did like the complete, like during playoff pools, those rankings.
Yeah. Okay. So just if we're looking at the quarterbacks in terms of just ranking them, in like raw point projection, and then we can do our adjustments for salary after that. I mean, I think that Watson and Luck are right at the top. I mean, I think that they're the 2 best quarterback plays. And then, on FanDuel, Watson is more expensive. So I think that Luck is kind of like the easy pivot there. And yeah, absolutely. Like, and we know like where his passing game distribution is going, like at the top, because with Ebron largely healthy, with Hilton healthy enough to play, these guys are going to be the target dominators. But we do have Dontrell Inman starting to move back into the picture very much. And he's like the clear-cut number 2 receiver for the Colts right now. But the Texans have been terrible against tight ends all year. Ebron had good games against them in both of their meetings this season. The first one came with Jack Doyle playing. Ebron wasn't even playing very much at that time. And then the second one he had 4 for 65 and a touchdown, didn't even get a target in the second half of that game. Got all of his production in the first half. But this Texans defense has been just gashed by tight ends all year long. I think that it's a big enough sample size that we can say that this trend does matter. I mean, teams that are targeting tight ends against the Texans completing 76% of their passes, 8.8 yards per attempt, 9 touchdowns. So I think it's real clear, like Luck, Hilton, and Ebron is going to be a strong stack there against the Texans.
Yeah, and especially when you look at Ebron on DK, like the price isn't even prohibitive over there. He's only $5,200. I kind of assumed on a short slate that he would actually be priced up a little bit more. You look at Zach Ertz, $6,400. I think that's perfectly reasonable that he's the most expensive tight end. But outside of Ebron, I mean, Reeves, it gets really ugly at the tight end position over here. Like if you're looking away from Ertz or Ebron, I got to say Ebron's probably my favorite tight end on this entire slate when you consider price. So are you going to a lot of Ebron, Reeves?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Listen, man, tight end was bad, and we had 16 games to play. We choose from. We only got 4 games to choose from. What do you think the player pool looks like now? We're going to be talking about guys like listen, Life of Jarwin has been balling the last few weeks. It is awesome game. He blew up in week 17, unfortunately. Now everyone's been hip to him. Ryan Griffin, I think across from this other game, like we're punting, is interesting. There's these guys that are owned. Especially at the tight end position, because it's Ertz, it's Ebron, and there's just a clear drop off.
Yeah, I mean, look, maybe the Trey Burton revenge game. Maybe people want to do that, and we'll get into that game a little bit later. But yeah, like Ebron's just a guy for me that I'm going to have a lot of. And Reeves, you mentioned a guy in Ryan Griffin that, I mean, do I love the spot? No, but at 2,600, what do you think about Griffin?
Yeah, I think he's just in an interesting spot. So opposing teams, we talk about the defense, obviously the Matt Everplus defense that they've incorporated. Opposing teams target their tight ends 24.5% of the time against the Colts. That's the second highest rate in the league. The last time these teams played, Deshaun Watson completed 11 of 11 targets to tight ends for 151 yards. Ryan Griffin got the best of that. He caught 5 for 80. He's also just playing a lot more. He's run 191 pass routes since week 9 compared to 92 for Jordan Akins and 83 for Jordan Thomas over that span. So he's doubling up the field. He doesn't always get the targets based on they just jam, DeAndre Hopkins with targets. But the Colts defense might actually funnel some targets, down to these tight ends like it did in the last matchup. And they've done that against basically all their opponents. The interesting factor we'll see if Kiki QT looks like he's going to be back in this game and they flip-flop both games. QT was there the first game. That was the first game he came back, went from his preseason hamstring injury and had 11 – he caught 11 passes on 15 targets that first meeting. They used him kind of like out of the backfield as like a tertiary, just short near line of scrimmage targets. And the tight ends didn't do much that game. Then he didn't play in that second game, and they threw all over him to the tight ends. So it's going to be curious to see how QT's return really changes the dynamic between the Texans offense, because, that's really the only other guy that's going to catch passes there, because they don't throw to the running backs at all. And mobile quarterbacks we've, studied over the years just really don't target their running backs. That's why I've seen guys like Lamar Miller not really be involved in the passing game, since he's, transitioned to the Texans. So, Ryan Griffin's just one of those cheap punts that where if you line up some dots, you can get there for like a 5 for 70 game. Now, dude hasn't scored a touchdown in a game this year, so there's not a high ceiling there. He's more of just like a PPR, dart throw. So, there's your 100% more Ryan Griffin talk than your average podcast.
Yeah, and by the way, that was 6 seconds. That's plenty of Ryan Griffin talk. We don't need any more than that. Evan, you was talking about Ryan Griffin, and we're talking about this Texans offense now. And I think Kiki QT and kind of his availability for this game, that's a big deal for the Texans because, other than that, it's DeAndre Carter, who did not have a good game last week. He saw some targets. He lost the fumble, though, just did not look all that good out there. And DeAndre Hopkins, a guy at 8,700, I don't know if I want to pay that for DeAndre Hopkins, which just feels wrong because – typically the highest priced guys and the highest, projected point scorers at a position are going to be on the winning lineups in these kind of contests. But man, it's just tough to pay for DeAndre Hopkins on a slate where I can go cheaper for T.Y. Hilton, where I can pay for some other running backs. I don't know. What do you think about this Houston passing attack?
It's like, I don't want to bet against DeAndre Hopkins. That's typically a losing proposition. But we can talk about what occurred between these teams with DeAndre Hopkins during the regular season. The first game, he was a monster, 10 for 169 and a touchdown. In the second one, no Will Fuller, and it was Demaryius Thomas was still trying to get incorporated into the offense. And the Colts held him to 4 for 36 and 1 touchdown. Didn't get the touchdown until really late. Actually came after a 47-yard catch and run by Ryan Griffin that set him up. But the Colts were very aggressive. They don't necessarily always do this, but they were very aggressive, game planning specifically against DeAndre Hopkins, because they normally play a pretty straightaway, Tampa 2, old Tony Dungy style defense, but they game planned against DeAndre Hopkins, and hey, it worked. So my guess is that they will do that again. Doesn't mean that it'll be successful by any means. The Texans themselves will be more prepared for it. But I think at the end of the day, I'm going to have DeAndre Hopkins in my lineup.
Well, I just keep looking at it. I'm saying, who else am I supposed to play from Houston? I guess that's my biggest issue, because Houston, they're at home. It's the highest total on the slate. They're 3-point favorites, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. I'm supposed to play some of these Texans guys, and yet here we are. If I'm not playing Hopkins, am I really going to feel good about a guy like QT, like DeAndre Carter, Lamar Miller? I certainly don't feel good about. So if it's not Hopkins, I guess, on Houston, Evan, who's it going to be?
I think that we have to determine like who is going to be like, in like playing a lot. That's the first thing that we should try to determine. And I think that obviously DeAndre Hopkins is locked in as the Texans' X receiver. And then at slot receiver, if Kiki QT comes back, which it certainly looks like he will because he's been a full participant in practice, then he's going to play slot receiver. And then who's going to get the other position outside? And I think it's probably going to be Vincent Smith. Vincent Smith last week ran 5 more pass routes than DeAndre Carter, and of course saw 32 more air yards than DeAndre Carter. And Vincent Smith is like, he should be right around the stone minimum. And so he becomes an interesting sleeper. And then Ryan Griffin, I think, is my favorite, pound for pound, based on price sleeper on the Texans team. Because the matchup is really good. He's going to be out on the field a lot. We've seen that the Colts are willing to scheme specifically against DeAndre Hopkins, and that opened things up for Ryan Griffin. How do you think he's getting wide open for 47-yard, catch and runs? He's not, he's not like George Kittle or something like that, So, but yeah,
I'm putting it politely.
There are because of the high total on the game. Because of the game is going to be played indoors, because we know that the Colts will do this dedicated double team thing with DeAndre Hopkins, I think that we can look at the rest of their passing game and try to pull out cheap sleepers.
So, Reeves, who would that be if you're looking at the cheap sleepers? Are you on to Vincent Smith as well? Are you looking at maybe running, trying DeAndre Carter again? I think QT is really interesting at 4K because he's somebody that, before Demaryius Thomas came over, he was essentially the number 2 wide receiver on this team after Will Fuller was out. So, I think QT is really interesting assuming he's healthy. So, Reeves, who else do you like in this Houston team?
Yeah, I think you guys just laid it out like that. I think the play is to go under the projected field on Hopkins, still own him, but go under, and then go over on all the other guys. And then when it doesn't work, you play the Sunday slate.
I hate that feeling when you just like, and it's just because you're just stone dead and you're just like, all right, let's click the buttons. All right, I can still hit the nuts. And that the thing people say you can still hit the nuts on the Sunday slate. But yeah, I think these guys are fine. As far as the running backs in this game, Reeves, not a great matchup for either of them. Marlon Mack, he's 6K. Lamar Miller seems too cheap at 4,900. But again, he's 4,900, and that might be too much for 5 points. So what do you think about the running backs here?
Yeah, tough spot for both of them. Marlon Mack is one of these guys that's a tricky guy to nail because he has really good weeks, really bad weeks. And then he's facing a Houston team on the road that's allowing the fewest yards per carry to opposing running backs, 3.1 yards per carry, 62.5 rushing yards per game, second in the league allowed to opposing backfields. And both times that these teams played, the Colts had 0 rushing success. Their running backs carried the ball 31 times for 64 yards in these 2 games. Mack did score a touchdown that second meeting. Just not a great spot. That's why we like the Texans so much, though, is they force teams to throw all over them, and they're bad against the pass. That's why we like, the passing game so much. I think it's an interesting spot for Marlon Mack if you're in like a playoff league. Because if they win this game, you might get a matchup with like the Chiefs in round 2. Yeah. But he's not a guy I'm high on, in this game. Probably not a guy I'm going to really max out ownership on and be with the field or, higher than the field on. I'm just not really feeling it. And Lamar Miller is Lamar Miller. What do you want to say, man? Lamar Miller is he's the one-piece bikini of fantasy football. He's just not like a guy that we're really loving. He's not involved in the passing game. This dude has, he has 10 catches his past 6 games for 48 yards. Just not anything we really love.
Oh, I'm sorry. I kick over the one-piece bikini of fantasy football. That is too good. Now I know what my Halloween costume is going to be next year. Evan, do you have any interest in either of these running backs? Because look, if you're building a ton of teams, I think you have to have a few shares. But by and large, I'm just kind of off both these guys.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to be in jam them in position with either guy for sure. What I kind of wanted to talk about was the total on the game and the team totals, because this is strange to me. I think that it's almost like they're forcing the Texans in as favorites here. The Colts over their last 7 games have allowed 15 points per game. And the Texans team total is 25 points. The Texans pass protection is a huge problem. I mean, no offensive line in the NFL gives up more penetration than the Texans offensive line. They gave up the most sacks, quarterback hits, and tackles for loss in the NFL. And it didn't get better down the stretch. They tried to make it better just by throwing less, but they didn't make it better. And they were very fortunate to have faced the easiest schedule in the NFL, which was projected as to be the case before the season and turned out to be the case. So, man, this is weird. Like, look, I think it could be a shootout for sure, and it could end up like 37-34, but, man, I think that the Colts are a better team. I guess the team totals are kind of telling us that the sportsbooks see it that way because the Colts are on the road and they're only 1.5-point dogs. So I
just can't believe this has been bet up.
The Colts are even money on the money line, which tells you just about all you need to know.
Okay.
Because I was looking at the Fantasy Labs Vegas tracker. I'm seeing Houston at 3 in some places, which doesn't make any sense to me. Because Evan, I'm with you. I think Houston's I think Indy's a better team, and I kind of think they win this game. I mean, I think they might win this game by 7 to 10 points.
Yeah, I do too. I think
it just feels wrong to me, this line. Like, that's why I'm so confused. It's moving the other way. Reeves, what side do you like in this game as far as betting goes? We can touch on that real quick.
Yeah, I do have a betting column that comes out with Raymond Summerlin, and I actually picked the under in this game. So I mean, since 2000. So NFL playoff games are typically lower scoring than regular season games anyways. Divisional round playoff games or wild card round playoff games since 2000, the under's hitting 58.3% of the time. In games with game totals of 47 points or higher, in the wild card round since 2000, the under's hit 64% of the time. If you look at what Houston and Indy, their games they've been playing lately, their lower scoring games in Houston this season averaged a combined 42.8 points. The under hit 5 of 8 times in just games in Houston anyways. You got a Colts team that's been hot. They haven't given up points. I mean, a lot of points here where I think it's the under is going to hit just by a natural way of, these games aren't as high scoring as we like in the playoffs. And you've seen a lot of these totals on the slate dictate that. I think that this game has a lower game total, I believe, than either two of the regular season games. That I have to double check on that. But I'm more on the underside. But I think that the Colts get over from a fantasy sense, that their guys still get over because it's going to be all passing.
Yeah, I like the Colts side here. I don't know whether I like the over-under, but I certainly like the Colts to win this game. And, maybe this is just one of those spots where maybe I'm just going to be wrong, but I feel strongly enough about it that it's just that's one of the reasons I'm actually concerned. Because, when you feel this good about a spot and we're all sitting here agreeing, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but
right.
How weird is it that this is the 5th time in 8 years the Texans have been in this spot playing that Saturday 4:30 game?
That's strange. I didn't know that. Then again, I didn't know the Texans been in the playoffs 5 times in the last 8 years. So
one thing I would say is to not overlook like how kind of legit the Colts defense is, number one. Yeah. And the Colts defense is, I believe, the cheapest defense on the slate. And I mean, you are like starting off with 4 sacks whenever you're facing Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, they're the second cheapest defense on DK, 2,300. The Eagles are the only one cheaper, and I don't even hate them at 2,200.
And another guy I just wanted to mention, and we can move on to the next one because I know we gotta jam him in. But Nyheim Hines is going to be pretty interesting, I think, on DK. And the Texans, like, they have been just great in run defense, but you can kind of hurt them in the passing game with RBs. And Nyheim Hines, I mean, he should be in the mix for like 4 to 6 or 7 receptions in this game. Depending on how hard they want to go with game planning to attack the opponent's weaknesses, I think he could just play a bigger role than expected in this game. And certainly if they fall behind, then he has a chance to be the nuts on the slate.
Yeah, and guys like that are always 2%, they provide such a big edge. You don't have to go that far. You only have to have them on 10, 15% of your teams to really have a giant edge on the field. All right, let's talk Seattle and Dallas. Dallas at home, they're 2.5-point favorites, 42.5-point total spread. And if you want the most expensive running back on the slate, it's coming from this game. Ezekiel Elliott priced all the way up to $9K in this matchup. Reeves, are you prioritizing Zeke on this slate? Because I struggle to see how you don't.
Yeah, God damn, man. Zeke's in Jammerman status if there's a guy on the slate. I think it's him and Luck. You just start with him and Luck if you're just building like a brass tacks team. Obviously, those are going to be the chalkiest guys. I think they have the highest ownership. He's a no-brainer. Led the NFL with 25.4 touches per game. Then when you look at his gap from the field, I mean, I think it's more interesting to say who's the RB2 on this field. I think it's a lot more fun conversation because it's clearly Zeke. The Seahawks have been getting smashed in all-purpose yardage by running backs. They've allowed 152 yards from scrimmage to running backs over their past 10 games. Zeke's been catching the ball. Only Christian McCaffrey caught more passes than Zeke from weeks 9 through 16 on the season. So, yeah, I mean, it's just pretty easy. You're getting him as a home favorite. Easy jamming, man. Now tell me who's the RB2.
I don't know, but I mean, I'm really thinking because I'll script this slate. Honestly, Evan, I'm thinking about just doing 150 Zeke teams. Like, I just struggle to see how I'm not going to be happy with my lineups after that, barring injury.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would too. I mean,
yeah, it's just, I mean, it's just, you just got to do it. Like, I just think
but everybody's going to play him too, though. So if your goal is to go over the field, and he's 92% owned, then you're only going over 8%.
I'm clicking the lock button, man. I don't see a reason not to. Like, I just, he's expensive, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. I'm sitting here building lineups. I mean, I got a shell with Luck, Zeke, and Hilton. I still got 4,500 per player left. And on a slate that's pretty short where we're going to have some value guys like we were talking about the Texans guys. We'll talk about some cheaper tight ends we want to go there. There are some really, really good cheap defenses, like the Eagles, the Colts. We've talked about them. I think the three cheapest defenses, by the way, the Chargers, the Colts, and the Eagles, they're all playing quarterbacks that can get sacked and that are turnover prone. So I have no problem with any of those three. I will not be spinning up a defense on this slate. But to me, Zeke, you just lock him in. And let's talk about the other piece of Dallas, because I think we talk about we got to, catch up a little bit because somehow we only got 4 games on the slate and we're already behind because that's how we roll on the pick six every now and then. But this passing game, talk to me about Dak and talk to me about Amari Cooper, Evan.
Yeah, this is a difficult one. I think that Dak might struggle in this game. Again, we're dealing in very small sample sizes, and this is a very small sample size sport. So we don't really have big sample sizes to deal with. But Dak Prescott has struggled. He's performed better against man defenses than zone defenses in his career, like by a pretty significant margin. He has faced, and the Seahawks are a primarily zone defense. He has faced Pete Carroll's defense twice in his career, and he was bad in both of them. The Seahawks are sort of like a run funnel defense because they've been bad against the run, but they've been better against the pass because they can rush the passer. They finished number 11 in the NFL in sacks. They were number 4 in quarterback hits. Frank Clark on the edge, Jerron Reed coming up the middle. Just 5 of the last 15 quarterbacks to face the Seahawks were top 12 scorers on the week. We have this history of struggles that also zone defenses tend to be better against mobile quarterbacks, not giving up big rushing games to the mobile quarterbacks. The Seahawks allowed the 11th fewest quarterback rushing yards per game this season. So I think that Dak might struggle. I think it needs to be a Zeke game if the Cowboys are going to go into this game planning to try to attack the Seahawks' weaknesses and, avoid their strengths. I think that they need to try to drop back Dak as infrequently as possible. He just had a great game, I understand, against the Giants. I mean, that might have been like the best game of his career. I mean, he definitely made like some of the best throws of his career in that game. He was unbelievable. Was not playing with Zeke, was not playing with Zach Martin at right guard, who was due back this week. But I think that he might struggle in this game. He does have strong home splits. So that's something that is kind of working in his favor. But I think the passing game might struggle in this game.
What about you, Reeves? Are you on this Dallas passing game? Because I feel like we have to have some Amari. And again, you want to throw, a dart at a guy like Michael Gallup, I guess that's fine. But for the most part, it's just about Zeke for me on the Dallas side.
Yeah, I kind of like Amari a little bit more, I guess, than both of you guys. I mean, Seattle went through a stretch in the middle of the season where they were just getting crushed by boundary receivers, like absolutely murdered. And they've kind of cooled off and just given up some modest games, here at the end. Diggs got him for 4 for 76 and Tyreek only 4 for 74. But, man, they allowed some real big ceiling games in the middle of the season to outside wide receivers. And we've already seen Amari have, overall wide receiver 1 upside on a full slate of games at home in Dallas's games. And the targets have still been there. I mean, he still had 11 targets last week. So, I mean, I'm kind of looking at this wide receiver field, and I'm looking at his price. So not so much on DK where he's priced, but on FanDuel, he's priced really low from where you just lay out the field. So, I mean, I'm looking at him over there. I'm probably a lot higher on him at 6,700, over there than I will be on DK. But, I mean, he's priced really favorably and shown the upside. So, I mean, I don't really care if he's a guy that really busts because the targets have been there where I still think I'll get a nice little level of floor there anyways, even if he hits for just 60 yards. But I'm probably a little higher on him. I don't think it's a great week to go to Jarwin, even though I was joking about him earlier and chasing those 3 touchdowns last week. He's been solid, though. I brought him up a couple weeks ago when they played the Colts, just as a guy to punt with. Seattle actually, for the defense does matter crowd, they have been pretty good against tight ends, and they faced a lot of good tight ends. They faced Travis Kelce, held him way under his season averages. Both games against George Kittle, he was way under his season averages. They faced Jared Cook, Greg Olsen, Jimmy Graham. None of those guys did anything against them. So, I mean, he's not a guy I'm real high on and chasing those points with that tight end. I outright like Ryan Griffin, the guy we talked about before, just more than Blake Jarwin.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What about any interest in this Seattle team? Because Russ is going to be under-owned on a 4-game slate, and we're supposed to have interest in Russ at 5,700, under-owned on a 4-game slate. But it is against Dallas. It's a really tough matchup, and I kind of think Dallas kind of rolls in this game. I think it's like a 23-7 kind of game. I think it's low scoring. I think Dallas rolls at home. I don't know. Maybe I'm just off here. Evan, what do you think about the Seattle side?
Yeah, Reeves brought up the debate of who would be the RB2 on the slate, and I think it's a good one. First of all, let's establish who's in the mix. So Chris Carson, 1, Melvin Gordon, Marlon Mack, Lamar Miller, then Tarek Cohen, Jordan Howard. So I think it's Carson over Melvin Gordon. And that's primarily because of injury concerns that we'll talk about more when we discuss the Chargers. But I think that Chris Carson, he enters this game with 20-plus touches in 4 straight. The Cowboys, something went wrong with their run defense a couple times late in the season, and it might have just been a blip. Both of the games where they gave up the big rushing numbers they were against Saquon Barkley, they were against Marlon Mack late in the year, and they were both on the road. And, of course, the Cowboys are playing at home here. And they have had big home road splits all year in terms of one loss in particular. They just have played better at Jerry World this year. But they showed enough cracks, I think, late in the season that I think I would put Carson number 2 on in the running back rankings for the wild card round. I mean, he's been on fire. He's the centerpiece of the Seahawks offense. I know it really should be Russell Wilson, but it's Chris Carson. He's on a freaking roll down the stretch, and their run blocking has been really strong as well.
Yeah, and Chris Carson's a guy, 6,800 over on DK. And we talk about usage all the time with running backs. Who's going to get the touches? Well, here we go. Carson, the last 4 games, 19, 27, 22, 22. And Reeves, I know I said that I thought that Dallas rolls in this one, but if there's one thing we know about Seattle, it's that they are committed to running the football almost no matter what. So, Reeves, what do you think about the Seattle offense?
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. I actually ranked Carson 2 in the rankings because 1, he's playing the best football out of all those guys that we brought up. And 2, I just don't think even defensive matchups you got to bring in the equation. I just don't think they really matter for Seattle. That's what they've already shown the blueprint. They've done it against everyone. They ran on the Vikings. They ran on everybody they faced. So, I mean, I'm not really that pressed for it. And the game script's never going to probably get to a spot where they get pushed out of the run game. And, that's probably the biggest worry about this game is probably just overall play volume. I mean, teams against Seattle run the fewest amount of plays because of, unless you want to count like Baltimore in the stretch. But, I mean, we've got both of those teams playing this weekend where we could have the Chargers and the Cowboys just not run a lot of plays. It could really hurt the ceiling for everyone involved on both sides of the football. But, yeah, I'm on Carson the most. I think it's a tough spot for Russ. The Cowboys just don't give up big passing games. It's one of those games where Russ is going to have to be more efficient than have volume. He's lived that way the entire season, so we can't fade that from happening. But, I mean, it's probably one of those games where he throws for right around 200 yards, and, the Cowboys have only allowed more than 2 passing touchdowns in one game all season long. So it's going to be tough for him to live off of touchdown, efficiency in this game. I think he's a solid play. I think he's going to get you like that 15 to 17 points. I just don't know if it's like how probable it is for Russ to have like a 30-point game, even though he's that type of player.
Yeah, and when we were doing our intro, Evan mentioned that maybe we'll gamble on a little East Central today, which is David Moore, not the high school. And he's only 3,500 in this matchup. Again, not a great matchup for him. But, Evan, what do you think about these Seattle wide receivers? Baldwin, Lockett, David Moore. Is there anybody you're leaning toward?
Yeah, I think that Baldwin is the guy that I like the best. He took week 14 off with a hip injury, and I think it did him a lot of good. He's been dominating opportunity ever since. I mean, he's got 11 more targets than any other Seahawk in the final 3 games. His 348 air yards in weeks 15 through 17, 7th most in the league. And then, you look at just from a matchup standpoint, he's running 64% of his routes in the slot. He's got over half of his catches on the season on slot routes. Cowboy slot corner Anthony Brown has battled a back injury for like the entire second half of the season. And PFF had him at 75% completion rate, not over 9 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns from weeks 9 through 17. He missed time in there. He's allowed 1.6 yards per slot coverage snap. That's the second most among qualified slot defenders. So, if we're going to break it down and look at just straight cornerback matchups, look at who's getting the opportunity, maybe factor in some expectation that the Seahawks could fall behind as the road team facing a team that has been great at home all season. Then I think that Doug Baldwin is the go-to guy. Tyler Lockett led the team in receiving over the course of the year, but they spiked his ADOT late in the season, and he's been more of a high variance guy, and he still had some pretty good games. But I think that Doug Baldwin is the strongest play because of where he plays and because of his recent usage.
Yeah, and what do we know about, teams in the playoffs? What do they like to do? They like to go to their stars, and you got to kind of ask, who does Seattle think their star wideout is? Is it Baldwin? Is it Lockett? To me, Russ trusts Baldwin the most, so that's where I'm going to go with as well. Let's move on. Let's talk Chargers at the Ravens, 41.5-point total, Baltimore -3 at home. And Reeves, we just saw this game, didn't we? We just saw this exact game. Like, can't we just replay it from last 2 weeks ago and just be done with it?
I think that's what makes this game so interesting. So the Ravens, and there's a lot of storyline dynamics here. One, I just want to mention that I think one of the most underwritten things about the Ravens dynamic is how fortunate were they to have Greg Roman on their staff during this transition. He was there in 2011, 2012 when the 49ers transitioned from Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick, changed that entire offense on the fly, and they went to the Super Bowl running an entirely different offense. Then he was with the Bills for the 2 years they had, Tyrod's first 2 years as starters, and made him a highly functional, efficient passer with a run game. And then he's there in the middle of the season to help them, incorporate Lamar Jackson and on the fly change their entire offense to a run-oriented offense. Now, what that is, it's hard to prepare for what the offense the Ravens run in like a given week for NFL. Like, it's hard to just on the fly. You got 1 week of practice, really 3 days of practice to incorporate, a game plan to run against this. And to be honest, the Chargers did a pretty good job when they played. They allowed the fewest rushing yards the Ravens had. They still allowed 159 rushing yards, but Lamar Jackson had 13 carries for 39 yards, by far his lowest in any game. He has at least 67 rushing yards in every other game in his 7 starts. So they did a good job there. They're going to have a second time to make more adjustments. So I think it's really interesting. I think this game is really interesting to see how it plays out. I think that the Chargers got boned by getting the Sunday early game. I think they really got boned by the league in that dynamic. I think they should have gotten either the Saturday game where it wasn't, an early start. Because, West Coast teams have just been so bad in these playoff games and early starts. The Chargers were actually the last AFC team to win an early start in 2013. against the Bengals. So, I mean, it's going to be real interesting, this rematch. I mean, the Ravens are really – it's really easy to talk about. It's really Lamar Jackson, and all the other dudes are just dudes. Like, I think a lot of people are going to be like, we're going to want to play Mark Andrews as like the punt tight end. I don't really have a problem with that. He's been a pretty good target for Lamar Jackson. But his 4 catches last week matched the season high. He's had more than 2 catches in just 2 of Lamar Jackson's 7 starts. I think he's more just like you chasing that 70-yard touchdown he had a couple weeks ago. Don't really love him. The running backs get yardage, but it's hollow yardage. They don't catch passes. They have just 2 touchdowns over the past 6 games because Lamar Jackson runs them all. And then Lamar Jackson himself, I think, is interesting. Man, we were real close last week to getting that 40-burger game. He had a 38-yard touchdown called back on kind of like a touchy holding penalty, and he had a touchdown that he should have had, but he pulled the ball back too early, and the Browns actually should have had a fumble 6 on it. And they got boned on that. But he almost showed that ceiling game last week. I just don't know if we're going to get it in round 2 with a team that is a good defense already inherently, played Baltimore well the first game, and has a chance to make adjustments.
Yeah, I don't know. This game is probably the most interesting to me too. And I just, man, when these teams played a few weeks ago, Keenan Allen was coming off the injury. Mike Williams just came off that giant game that came out of nowhere, and people were still trying to play Mike Williams. I don't know. It's just a weird game for me. Evan, what do you think about this game?
Yeah, I mean, that stood out to me too, that the Chargers are having to play this 1 p.m. Eastern time game on the East Coast. And like, why wouldn't they make the Texans-Colts game at this time and then allow the Chargers-Ravens to play on Saturday at, 4:30? Like, that would have made a lot more sense than the scheduling. And I think that hurts the Chargers. I think that Phillip Rivers hasn't necessarily been as affected by that as some of the West Coast teams, but it's still like not an ideal circumstance for a West Coast team to be playing in this sort of situation. And we just saw the Ravens go out to their place and punch them in the mouth 22-10. And they kind of did what they always do. And, they made a lot of plays on defense, and, Phillip Rivers kind of finished the season kind of slowly, really after the comeback game against the Chiefs. I thought it was interesting last week that Kenneth Dixon, for the first time since coming off IR return, out-touched Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards still played more snaps, and I think that he's the favorite for touches. But I think that was interesting, and Kenneth Dixon had a great game. I mean, he had 120 total yards. So I think that we should go into this game anticipating a near even committee in the Ravens backfield. It's going to be interesting, on the Sunday games. Like, I think that you can actually play Gus Edwards and Kenneth Dixon in the same lineup.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. Like, especially on the Sunday where there are only 2 games. Yeah, I think that's not only fine, I actually think it's a really good strategy that a lot of people utilize. So, we're talking about a guy like Kenneth Dixon. He's 4K, Gus Edwards 4,200. I would assume more people go toward Gus Edwards. Evan, where do you think people play Dixon and chase the game last week, or do you think more people go to Edwards?
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, I don't know. Leave it at that.
Yeah, no, that's kind of how I feel too. So, Reeves, do you have a preference between these Baltimore running backs, if you like either of them even?
So in the article coming out tomorrow, I ranked them in the exact same spot.
I like it. I'll tell you, I can't imagine we have it out yet. Let me see. Give people peek behind. Let's see if we've got projected ownership out yet for the wild card round. Let's see. Okay, we do. I'm going to sort by running back. Let's see who works.
I mean, a DK, I don't see how you don't play Dixon more, because even 2 catches is like an extreme advantage.
Yeah, we've got Kenneth Dixon at 22% and Gus Edwards at 10%. And honestly, like, I'm kind of with you. Like, you flip a coin as far as who's going to get – because, Dixon, obviously, he's got a better chance in PPR of getting there. But I think Gus Edwards has a better chance of finding the box. So you talk about upside, it actually might be Gus Edwards. And I really think that this is kind of one of those spots where you play the ownership game. By the way, Zeke, projected ownership of 72.5%, which is still too low. Big props to the 28.5% of you, 27.5% of you for providing the overlay this week. All right, let's talk the Chargers side of the football, because, Melvin Gordon, Evan, you said that you wanted to kind of talk about Melvin Gordon and, like, his health situation. it's just a mess right there, man. Like, I don't know how to treat this, because if he was healthy, I would love him, but he's not. And I just don't know what to do with Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, he's a road dog against, against one of the best run defenses in the league. And, their other RBs have played pretty well. I mean, Justin Jackson and Austin Eckler is back now. So, and Melvin Gordon, like a couple of weeks ago when he was supposed to be pretty healthy, I mean, he lost a ton of passing game work to Justin Jackson. It was in this game. It was in this, the first round of this game. So even if he plays, like, he could be limited. It could also, be a situation like, you remember last year when Antonio Brown was going up against Jalen Ramsey and, no one really trusted his health, but hey, you had to have him, against the Jaguars in, I think it was the divisional round.
Yeah.
It could be a situation like that too, but it seems unlikely. I mean, I think that he has legit injuries. He has multiple injuries. He's been dealing with knee and ankle injuries. So he's a very high risk play, no doubt.
Yeah, and of course the upside is there, but at the same time, Reeves, I saw you when I just brought up Melvin Gordon, you were shaking your head, man. So tell me what you think about Gordon.
Yeah, I think Evan made up a good point about the Antonio Brown thing. It's kind of a spot like that. At least we have, at least with a wide receiver, like you have like more opportunity for splash plays, that can float like a fantasy line. With Melvin Gordon, I don't know how we're going to get that. Snap rates, his 2 games that he's been back have been way down. He played 67% of snaps, 54% of snaps. That's way off his seasonal pace. Evan talked about him losing receiving game work to Justin Jackson in that first game he came back. The matchup also stinks on the road against the Ravens team that just has not allowed any type of rushing production at all in their house. They allowed just 100 total yards to the Chargers on the road to their backfield, on 23 touches when these teams played 2 weeks ago. He's just a tricky play. I mean, I don't even know. I'm probably just going to X him off and just hope I'm right.
That's brave, man. Like, I don't think, and I'm looking at the projected ownership, and this is, I think, one of the more fluid situations, because if we get some information that he either looks better or worse than expected, right now I'm looking at 20%. I think that's going to change a lot based on some later week reports. And it just kind of depends, like, what we hear. Now, as far as the passing game goes, obviously it's a tough matchup for the passing game of the Chargers against this Ravens defense. But the one guy that has a decent matchup is Phillip Rivers' favorite target, and that's Keenan Allen. So talk to me about Keenan Allen. He's the guy you're targeting here, Evan?
Yeah, and I think he's a volume play, and I think that his health is not a concern. It was at one point. He had a hip pointer kind of late in the year, missed almost the entire game against the Chiefs. But his playing time has been great. His usage has been good. I think that people will try to chase Mike Williams to some extent. And, man,
don't do it.
He is about as low floor of an option as you could possibly get. I think that, like, just from watching the games, I think that it seems like that Phillip Rivers is gaining more trust in him, or at least like trying to gain more trust in him. But yeah, I think that Keenan Allen is definitely the play if we're looking at Chargers pass catchers. People are going to try to maybe talk themselves into Hunter Henry. That's pretty dicey. It is a good area to attack the Ravens, though. I think you want to attack them in the middle of the field. Keenan Allen does a lot of route running in the middle of the field also. But I think that that's the weakness in their defense. You want to get guys matched up against their safeties, and also C.J. Mosley, who is not the inside linebacker, has not had a good year in pass coverage.
Yeah, you mentioned Hunter Henry. I'm sure Stephen A. is going to be playing a lot of him this week, but at minimum price at $2,500, I can't really blame him. I understand he's going to be in a snap count, on a pitch count, whatever, but man, you just got to figure that, like, when he's out there, it ain't going to be to run block, right, Reeves? Like, if Henry's out there, he's going to be getting a few targets.
Yeah, he'll be one of those guys where, like, snaps won't tell the story. It'll be, routes and situation he gets in. Because when he's in the game, it's going to be him to get targeted with the football, basically. And his involvement actually hurts the guy we talked about before, Mike Williams. Because even if he's going to come in situationally, that hurts what Mike Williams does best. I mean, no player in the top 50 scoring wide receivers in the NFL this season relied on touchdowns or fantasy points more than Mike Williams. 33.3% of his fantasy output came just from touchdowns alone. So if he doesn't have that in his back pocket, what are we going to do? And, he was a guy that had, 3 targets when these teams played 2 weeks ago, 7 yards. What's the weird thing? One of the weirdest things about Mike Williams is he's getting, like, a rushing attempt every game. Like, it's like one of the weirdest things. Like, this guy keeps getting rushing attempts because he's just like, not that type of player. But he had that rushing touchdown against the Chiefs a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, he's the RB4. There's Melvin Gordon, there's Detrez Newsome, there's Austin Eckler, and then we got Mike. Oh, Justin Jackson. I forgot Justin Jackson. So he's really the RB5. Way to go, Mike. Yeah, I doubt I have a single Mike Williams team this week. Like, I just really hate this matchup. I remember I dug into it a few weeks ago, and I said I can't wait for people to chase that ceiling game from him because it's just not going to happen again. If you want to play any of these secondary pieces, Tyrell Williams always got splash play upside. Travis Benjamin, he has like 2 touchdowns a year, and every single one of them seem to screw me somehow. So I always have exposure to Benjamin. But besides that, I think we can move on. Let's talk our last game. It's Philly at Chicago, 41-point total. The Bears are 6-point favorites at home, and Philly just getting no respect, Evan. I'm a little bit surprised that they're this big of underdogs at Chicago. What do you think about this game, Evan?
Man, I've been putting off breaking it down because the Bears' entire receiver core is like, I have no idea what's going to happen with them. Taylor Gabriel left last week's game. Anthony Miller dislocated his shoulder again, and Allen Robinson didn't even play. So, and there's a scenario where like Taylor Gabriel could be an awesome play against Philadelphia, I think.
Oh, yeah. You get a deep guy like that against this Eagles secondary? Heck yeah.
Yeah, and he's real cheap, but he did bang up his ribs last week. Just kind of got to see, and I mean, I'm just kind of waiting on this, because if this pass catcher core is at full strength, I mean, it goes so deep, and Tarek Cohen cuts so much into the pass catcher core that it's like I never want to use guys on the Bears, and whenever I have like tried to talk myself into using guys on the Bears, like it has not worked out aside from like naked Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, like the last time I used a guy on the Bears, it was week 10 because I had a lot of Allen Robinson that week against the Lions. The week that he went off, and that was the last time I've used a Bear receiver, and it's just like you just never know who it's going to be. They spread the ball around so much. Yeah, like one of them might have a big game, but it's really tough to pinpoint. Reeves, do you have a preference as far as the Bears receiver goes, or are you just finding a dartboard?
I mean, it's hard to dislike Allen Robinson. He did practice he practiced in full today. I know his total season was a disappointment, but I mean, over his final 7 games played, he averaged 25% of the team targets. Over his past 3 games played, he was over 25% of the team targets. So he's been getting looks recently when he played. I really like Trubisky in this spot, man. I do, man. So he is like the most jarring like home road splits of any quarterback in the league. He's thrown 19 of his 24 touchdown passes at home. He's rushed for 39 yards per game at home. The Eagles have gotten murked by like mobile passers. We talked about this.
Same reason we played Deshaun.
We talked about it when we wanted to play Deshaun Watson a few weeks ago. Cam Newton got him for 26 fantasy points. Mariota got him for 30. Blake Bortles 20. Deshaun Watson 37. We've seen Mitchell Trubisky have QB1 overall upside at home in the season. So on a short slate, he definitely does. He hasn't been good since he's been back. I get it. But I mean, man, I feel like he's the dude that like could have like if there's outside of Luck or Watson that has like a really 30-point upside out of all the quarterbacks. And I think that if you don't really like the receivers and you can't nail them down, I mean, Cohen's probably in the best spot. The Eagles are vulnerable to pass catching options. The Eagles got really bad against the run for a stretch in the season, but then they've been really awesome like the final 3 games. They only allowed 82 rushing yards to running backs the past 3 games, but they allow 6.9 receptions per game to opposing backfields, which is 30th in the league, and 13.7 PPR points per game to backfields, which is 27th. So, I mean, it could be a game where Cohen gets dusted off. You just need game script to play out a little more for Cohen than it has over this like past 4-game stretch because he's been in single-digit touches now, I think in 3 of the past 4. So you need the Eagles to do their part a little bit.
You know, I'm sitting here, I was ready to pull up with something like, Trubisky's been so bad when he's been under pressure, and he really hasn't been all that bad when he's been under pressure. Like this season, as the season gone on, he's gotten better. He's got the 12th highest quarterback rating when under pressure this year. And like, Evan, talk me out of Mitchell. I do not want to have this great Saturday. Like I nail the early game on Sunday, and then I say, okay, all I need is Mitchell Trubisky to outscore Andrew Luck. That's God, that just sounds like an awful, miserable Sunday night, and I've had enough of those this season. So talk to me about Trubisky, man.
No, I'm 100% with Reeves on him. I really, really like him. But, I definitely want to see how the injury situation clarifies. I definitely agree that Tarek Cohen is maybe the guy to play him with, as opposed to his receivers. I want it to be Taylor Gabriel. Look, if we get like no Allen Robinson, we get no Anthony Miller, and it's just, clear, arrows pointing at Taylor Gabriel, that'd be kind of sweet, and then it's Josh Bellamy and Kevin White out there, Javon Wims running routes with them.
You're just making names up now. That's not a real
no, but then it would also be very clear that, Tarek Cohen would be smash play. But, like, Trubisky's not that cheap, first of all, on FanDuel. I'm not sure what he is on DK. But, yeah, I mean, the Eagles have gotten just crushed by the dual threat quarterbacks. And that was a trend that, it was kind of small sample for a while and was like, they're facing Cam Newton, But, man, I mean, just one after the other. Every dual threat quarterback that faced them just had monster fantasy games, not even necessarily like just through rushing, but it was just through like just the threat being there against the Eagles. And they definitely they had to make a lot of adjustments late in the year because of all the things that happened in their secondary, and they were just playing their dudes back more and, and then they lost a lot of good players on defense as well. So I think that Trubisky, on the Sunday only, I think he's going to be my quarterback.
Yeah, I don't hate that on Sunday only. I'm sitting here looking at the main slate, though, thinking, it's basically down to two guys for me. I don't want to play Lamar Miller. It's Luck or Trubisky. Maybe let's chop them up and we'll kind of see what happens there. But you're right. 2 weeks ago, the three of us all just gagaed over to Deshaun Watson in this match, but I was getting victory laps. I told you to play Nick Foles. He had 5 touchdown passes. He scored fewer points with 5 touchdown passes than Deshaun Watson had. That's how much the running quarterback just destroyed this Philly team. And I don't know. I guess I'm with you on Trubisky. I don't know who the hell to pair him with. That's one of my big issues with Trubisky. Like, do I pair him with one of the 7 guys? Maybe you pair him with Trey Burton. Trey Burton, I think that he's a little bit interesting in this spot. I don't typically like the tight ends against the Eagles, but like Burton's a guy. Reeves, if you're not playing Ertz or Ebron, I feel like it has to be Burton, right?
Anytime you can play a guy that hasn't gone over 40 yards in 10 straight games, I think you just got to punch the button.
Yeah, but you get the passing touchdown too. They'll run the Philly special, and he'll throw it to Trubisky.
No. I'm fine with it. When you look at it, the slate. The target volume has been kind of in there. He's averaging 5.8 targets per game, 20.4% of the team, opportunity, since Trubisky returned. But like you said, it's just so ugly by default. I guess he's involved.
All right, so on the Philly side, we've got, Big Bleep Nick that's out there against the Bears. Not a great match for him. Going to be a lot of pressure on him during the game. Reeves, do you think the Nickster gets it done here against the Bears?
Listen, I don't know. It's hard to find an objective argument for the Eagles guys here. Maybe Evan has one. Other than just saying Nick Foles magic, I don't know what we're going to do. The Bears gave up no production to opposing passers. Just 3 quarterbacks hit 20 fantasy points a game all season. It's just real tough, man. It's tough. And they're at home. I don't know.
I appreciate you saying that. We're just like, who the hell knows at this point? Because this Eagles team, Evan, we expected them to fall apart last year. They went on to win the Super Bowl. We expect them to fall apart this year. Here they are in the playoffs. They're 6-point dogs, but they have a lot of momentum. Talk to me about Philly.
Yeah, early in the year they lost a lot of close games, and then late in the year, the regression hit, and they started winning some close games, and they finished fast. And dude, like, what it's going to take is like that Nick Foles magic. We didn't do shows last year in the playoffs, but if we would have been having the conversation like this about when they were facing Minnesota, we would have been like, we probably would have, viewed it sort of similarly, right?
I would have said no thanks.
Yeah, right. So that's like what it's going to come down to, like the magic. And so, do you believe in magic?
No, I don't. Santa's gone. The Easter Bunny's still 3 months away. I don't believe in any of this crap, but here we are for the second straight year, and I've got bleep Nick Foles ready to just shove it down my throat. So it's really frustrating.
I think the guys to look at on the Eagles side are maybe a little bit of Sproles on DK, and then I think they're going to I think the Bears will double team Zach Ertz and just remove him from the equation. Vic Fangio does a lot of double teaming as much as any. He's a schemer. He's an actual defensive coordinator who like schemes. He doesn't just run his scheme. He like schemes for the opponent.
What an idea!
Profound. Wow. I know. So I think that Alshon is also kind of interesting, and maybe Dallas Goedert as well. The Bears talking with Warren Sharp earlier this week, and he was like, he's big on like the personnel packages, and he noted that like the Bears have faced the fewest plays of 12 personnel in the NFL, 2 tight end sets. So he was thinking, maybe just because they haven't played against those sort of formations, they may be, a little bit, just looking for any way for the Eagles to maybe, put up a fight in this game. And Dallas Goedert, I think, could be a little bit interesting as like a long shot play that, no one is going to use. But I think that Alshon, to me, I think would be the best play. The Bears have actually given up a lot of production to wide receivers this season. The Eagles have been somewhat aggressive at times using Alshon Jeffrey, moving him into the slot where the Bears lost Bryce Callahan, their slot corner. And are now playing with a special teamer, Sheriff McManus. So, I think Alshon would be the guy that stands out to me on the Eagles.
What about Golden Tate? You're not on Team Golden Tate? I've been trying to make Golden Tate happen all year, much like Fetch. It has not happened, and I just got to kind of say, whatever. I'm still playing some Tate. Screw it. Reeves, what about you? What do you do?
The L on Golden Tate. They took the L on Golden Tate. Like, he doesn't play anymore.
I mean, hey, he had 6 whole targets last week.
Oh, yeah. Well, when he's in the game, they're like, all right, we're going to throw you targets.
That's like more than one hand worth of targets. Like,
do you want to know why Golden Tate's going to hit other than Crane just mentioned him, and because that's what Crane does on the show. Like Golden Tate's going to hit. So Golden Tate, over his career, because he was with the Seahawks to start his career, and then he was with the Lions. He's actually played 12 career games against Vic Fangio's defense, and he averages 27.8 receiving yards in 12 games against him. He's never gone over 65 receiving yards in a game. Just twice hit 50 yards against them, and he's got 2 career touchdowns against Vic Fangio's defense. A big sample size of games against him. So, of course, Crane's going to pull it. He's going to pull a rabbit. This is the Crane rabbit in that play. Golden Tate.
No, I actually like the Goddard play, actually. If I'm going to pull a rabbit out of the hat, I can't even think Goddard's really, really sneaky. Or a guy like Justin Jackson. Like those guys. Evan, you mentioned Sproles. I love that play this week because if you think that Chicago is going to get it done, like it's going to be all Darren Sproles coming out of the backfield. And even if it's not, I think we can expect Sproles to get enough touches because those snaps and the targets, dude, they've been there. I mean, just look at carries last 2 weeks, 7 and 9, targets 3 and 6. I mean, for his price tag at 4.4K, I think he's perfectly reasonable. One guy we didn't mention was a guy who I've just been saying is terrible for 2 years. And I've been making fun of anybody who's played him for 2 years. And meanwhile, he's gone over 14 in each of the last 4 weeks. And that's Jordan Howard. And like, I don't know, Reeves, do I just have to take the L on Jordan Howard? Is he better than I think he is?
No, definitely. I mean, definitely not go that far. I mean, I think when you look at Jordan Howard objectively, largest home favorite on the slate, you just got to put it into account. But like I mentioned earlier, I mean, the Eagles have really kind of like found their way after like the darkness of, being able to stop the run. I mean, 35 rushing attempts for 82 yards running backs the past 3 games. Jordan Howard has 77 touches though over the past 4 weeks. Quite a lot, I'm not going to get really much of anything in the receiving department, but I mean, he's one of those guys, I think just as a big home favorite, you can mix him in and just play those numbers because objectively, big home favorites are good spots for running backs.
Subjectively, he sucks. Evan, what do you think about Howard on this slate?
Yeah, I mean, same sort of deal. Definitely don't love him, but might just have to play him because he's like a decent process play. But we know that floor is just barren, and he's going to have to score a touchdown probably to really pay off.
All right, okay, I'll just pick one for me. All right, in tournaments. Jordan Howard, he's 4,600 on DK. If Austin Eckler plays, he's 4,400, and we're concerned about Melvin Gordon. Who would you rather? Ooh, Evan, you wince there.
Oh, man, I don't know about playing Eckler. What do you think about playing Eckler, Reeves?
Well, I think you look at the game Justin Jackson had against the Ravens, and you might draw a similar line and say, well, those are actually Eckler's reps because he didn't play in that game. You know, he had 10 targets in that game. I don't know, man. I can see it. It's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm just saying that, like,
on DK, for sure, it's a good question.
I think it's Eckler. I really do, because if we like, that's the thing. Like, if we think Gordon is banged up and he's actually going to be limited, like, where do those carries and where do those passes go? Like, I would imagine they're still going to run Melvin Gordon, but when it comes to a passing down, I would think it would go more toward Eckler. So I would kind of lean toward Austin Eckler there, especially if one's going to be 20% owned and one's going to be 2% owned.
Yeah, I think I might take Nyheim Hines over both of them.
Okay, I think he's fine too. By the way, real quick, projected ownership on these guys: Jordan Howard 10%, Nyheim Hines 5%, Austin Eckler 5%. I think
you can just go over on all three of them and be cool.
I'm never going to go overweight on Jordan Howard, man. Like, Jordan Howard's overweight enough for all of us. Like, I do not need all right. We got to get off here, guys. We kept the D train a little bit too long. He's got to get home to the missus, and we got to get on to building some playoff teams. A lot of fun. We're going to be back next week. Maybe the same bat time, maybe the same bat channel, definitely the same bat channel, but we'll let you know on Twitter when this show is going to air next week. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much, Rotoworld, RotoGrinders. It's been a lot of fun. DFS Pick 6. We'll see you later. Peace.